Listen, just because I have work that is published in a particular book, that doesn't mean I'm gonna be a biased reviewer. It just means that Roll for Combat knew how to find good writers. Today, we're going to talk about the Jewel of the Indigo Isles adventure path for Pathfinder 2nd Edition on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that is more than willing to unleash the Kraken against 5th level characters. Listen, I was running for high school students, and after about 7 months, I think that is a pretty restrained reaction on my part. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to my review of Jewel of the Indigo Isles, a pirate-themed adventure written by Roll for Combat, designed to take characters from 1st to 11th level in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This adventure was written by Stephen Glicker, Ron Lundeen, Mark Seifter, and Linda Zayas Palmer, and the story centers around a group of adventurers who have been called to the eponymous Indigo Isles, where they have been tasked to recover the treasure map of the famous pirate Captain Poppy Von Fleet, and then use that map to locate Von Fleet's treasure, Von Fleet's ship, and then ultimately use that ship to travel all around the Indigo Isles and get into various pirate-themed shenanigans. Jewel of the Indigo Isles is a sizable adventure path. The book is over 400 pages long, and this past year, I had the opportunity to run it for the Pathfinder TTRPG Club that I host at the high school where I work. My students were able to complete the first act of this adventure, and now that I've had the opportunity to see this adventure at the table and see how my students reacted to it, I thought it would be fun to come on this channel and share my thoughts about this adventure, the strengths of this adventure, and some of the things that I think could have been done a little bit better, and hopefully give you an idea of whether or not this adventure might be right for your gaming table. Now, allow me to say up front, there will be some spoilers in this video. I'm going to try to divide this video up where the earlier parts of this video cover information that is more facing towards the player characters, and then towards the back part of this video, I will try to cover content that is more directed at what storytellers should know, and I will give a very clear spoiler warning when I am getting into the Game Master specific material. So if you're watching this video and you are not the Game Master for your table, you may want to stop when I get to that spoiler warning, but send your Game Master this way if you're interested to see if they might be interested in running this adventure for themselves. I will note that right now on Roll for Combat's website, there are 2 free PDFs that are worth checking out if you are interested in this adventure path. The first is a player's guide for this adventure path, so it's the information that a Game Master would want to give to players if they were going to run this. And then the second PDF worth checking out is, well, it's essentially Act 1 of this adventure. It is an 80-page free adventure that basically covers the first act of Jewel of the Indigo Isles. So if you're a storyteller who is interested in this story, you can actually check out the first third of the adventure and see if it's presented in a way that you think you and your table would enjoy. And that leads naturally into one of the points I make on any review I do on this channel, which is, please remember that my opinion is just that, an opinion. I am just some random guy on the internet, and ultimately the best information when trying to make a purchase decision is to check something out for yourself. So I do recommend those free PDFs that Roll for Combat put out, because that's going to help you see if this product is really right for you. And I want to emphasize that those reminders are very important because if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you probably know Stephen Glicker, Mark Seifter, they are friends of the channel. Let's just be honest, today I'm talking about a product that was written by two people I consider to be friends. I frequently hype up a lot of the work that Stephen Glicker and Mark Seifter are doing, and anytime that they're doing something new, if I ask them for like teasers or preview content, they'll just send it to me. It's kind of crazy. Like right now, I have some of the preview artwork for Battlezoo Bestiary Elemental Storm, which is one of the upcoming books that they're working on. They're actually doing a pre-sale for Battlezoo Bestiary Elemental Storm, and I will have a link to that pre-sale in the video description. I think you guys know by now that Stephen and Mark are people that I consider friends, and I do like to hype their products on this channel, but that is why I think it's very important that if this content interests you, that you go check out those free resources that they offer to really get a good feel of whether or not this is something that's going to be the right fit for you and your gaming table. So there are going to be all kinds of links in the video description where you can check out their work, the things that they're doing, and some of the different bundles that they offer. Also, before we go any further in the review, please remember to do all the stuff that helps support the channel. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. All of those links will be in the video description as well. But with all of those out of the way, let's get started. So before we talk about Jewel of the Indigo Isle, I think it's very important that you realize that this book is actually a support product. Yes, this is a fun pirate-themed adventure path, and your players can get into all kinds of pirate-themed shenanigans as a result of this AP, but this product is ultimately a support product for something else, and that is the original Battlezoo Bestiary. So let's talk about that for a second. Back in 2020, Roll for Combat got permission from Paizo to revive the old RPG Superstar competition, and in the revived competition, Roll for Combat put out a challenge for people to create monsters for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As a result of that competition, they ultimately published Battlezoo Bestiary, which included all of the winning monsters from RPG Superstar, including my entry, the Salt Stalker. However, as part of that competition, Roll for Combat also promised to publish an adventure featuring many of the monsters from that competition. Ultimately, the adventure that was published is Jewel of the Indigo Isles, which is a pirate-themed adventure, allowing PCs to sail around the Indigo Isles and encounter many of the winning creatures from that competition, including my Salt Stalkers. Seriously, do you know how cool it is that my monsters are in an adventure? This is so amazing. I bring this up because if you're interested in running Jewel of the Indigo Isles, one thing that you need to be aware of is what you're going to need to actually run the adventure. Because this AP is built on RPG Superstar 2020, many of the monsters are from that original Battlezoo Bestiary. So if you're trying to run this adventure and you don't have the Battlezoo Bestiary, you're going to be out of luck for many of the stat blocks that you need. Now, obviously, not all of the monsters in this AP are from the Battlezoo Bestiary, but it is a very sizable number, meaning that the Battlezoo Bestiary is an important thing to have in your possession if you desire to run this. Some people might see that as a downside of this adventure path, but I think it's important to remember that ultimately this AP was developed to highlight the winners from RPG Superstar 2020. That was part of the design intention of this product, but just be aware of that. Still, if you're interested in running Jewel of the Indigo Isle, what should you have? What are you going to need? What is necessary to run this AP? Obviously, first and foremost, you're going to need the adventure path itself, either in PDF or published format, along with the Battlezoo Bestiary, which again is available in electronic and printed formats. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there is also a free Player's Guide PDF that is available on Roll for Combat's website as well. If you're interested in running this AP, I would recommend downloading that and sharing that with any players at your table, because it will go a long way in helping them get into the game. This adventure path is designed for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and since Mark Seifter is one of the core designers of Pathfinder 2e, It should come as no surprise that an AP he helped to write fits pretty well with the main rules of Pathfinder 2e. Anything that is core to Pathfinder 2e is going to fit pretty well with the Indigo Isles adventure, and you're not going to have to do a lot of adjustment. So anything that's in Player Core 1 or Player Core 2, it should work perfectly fine. You're not going to have a lot of trouble. And then for me personally, when I was preparing to run this game, I felt like a lot of the content from Guns and Gears fit really well with this AP as well. So I gave my students the option to use a lot of material from Guns and Gears, and I never had a problem including that material. So personally, I think the core material and then the Guns and Gears material from Paizo works really well with this AP as well. You can include other things that your table is comfortable including, but those are the things that I used, and all of that functioned perfectly. A few quick notes on some optional things that you might want to use. There are a number of bundles on Roll for Combat's website, and there are a couple of books that you will see paired quite frequently with Jewel of the Indigo Isle. Those are World of Battlezoo Indigo Isles and Battlezoo Ancestry's Dragons. Neither of these books are necessary to run Jewel of the Indigo Isles. The AP will be fine without them. World of Battlezoo is a setting book that was developed after Jewel of the Indigo Isles was published. If you want to expand the adventure, this can be a good product. And Mark Seifter's take on dragons, or as they call them in this product, eternal dragons, they've done the work to allow these to fit comfortably in the Indigo Isles setting. So if you have some players who want dragon PCs, this book could be useful. But again, neither of these books is strictly necessary. Roll for Combat just likes offering bundles with these in it, so if you're looking for some optional inclusions, both of these might be worth your while. Also, by the way, if you want me to do a review of these books in the future, let me know, because both of these are pretty fun, and I'd be interested in coming back to take a look at them. Another quick discussion worth having is, what about the remaster? Pathfinder 2e recently underwent the remaster process, and the Jewel of the Indigo Isle AP was published well before the remaster took place. Allow me to say, I actually ran this AP for my students while the remaster was ongoing. The remaster books were dropping throughout the school year, and I had to incorporate the changes from the remaster kind of as I was going with my students. And allow me to say, the AP works with the remaster really, really well. The changes I had to make to account for remaster content were honestly negligible. If you've done any work translating legacy content to remaster content, you're probably aware of the fact that it's pretty easy to do, and with this particular AP, I never found anything that was a serious sticking point. So if you're a game master that's concerned about what about the remaster, I'll go ahead and tell you it wasn't a problem at all. So let's go ahead and talk about the adventure setup and some of the adjustments that I had to make to run it for the club at my school. The basic premise is this: your PCs are a group of adventurers who have been called to the Indigo Isles, where the Gamayan king of the city of Rumplank has recently discovered that he is in possession of one half of a treasure map belonging to the famous pirate captain Poppy Von Fleet. Now you may have noticed the word Gamayan. That is a new ancestry that is specific to the Indigo Isles campaign setting. There are rules available from Roll for Combat if your players want to play some of the unique ancestries that exist in the Indigo Isles. So you're going to have things like the Gamayan Parrot Folk, the Orpok Pig Folk, the Hardrigan Ram Folk. I really love the Hardrigan, they're pretty cool. There are unique ancestries to this setting. Roll for Combat does provide those if your players want to use them. But in this particular instance, the king of the city of Rumplank has found half of a map belonging to this famous pirate, and he has called some adventurers together to locate the second half of the map, put it together, and then try to locate the treasure that once belonged to Captain Poppy Von Fleet. Act 1 of this adventure is a classic treasure map style adventure. The players are going to be piecing together the treasure map, and then following the treasure map, and then ultimately locating the treasure, a portion of the eponymous Jewel of the Indigo Isle. At the end of Act 1, the adventurers will gain possession of a pirate ship, and then in Act 2, the King of Rumplank is going to send them touring around the Indigo Isles on this pirate ship as they show off the treasures that they've discovered and try to find the remaining pieces of the Jewel of the Indigo Isle. Finally, in Act 3, the adventurers will return to Rumplank, where a massive party will be thrown in their honor, celebrating all of the treasure that they found and all of the renown that they've gained. However, along the way, an ancient enemy of Captain Poppy Von Fleet has returned. And in Act 3, as the festivities take place, this ancient enemy gathers its forces, meaning that the players ultimately must fight to protect their new home from this ancient enemy. As you can tell, the whole of this adventure is contained entirely in the Indigo Isles setting that Roll for Combat has developed, meaning that the world of Indigo Isles is all you need to run this adventure. Now, I will say that as the setting is literally just a group of islands, this is a setting that you can easily incorporate into other games without much conflict. For my high school club, the setup of the club, the assumption of the club, is that every member of the club is a member of the Pathfinder Society, and every time we have a game, that the Pathfinders are just being sent out on a particular adventure. So, when I ran Jewel of the Indigo Isles for my club, the adjustment that I made to the story is the Indigo Isles were located somewhere to the west-southwest of Garoond, and that the King of Rumplank had contacted the Pathfinders to help him locate the second half of the treasure map, and then the story ran like normal from there. This is a setting that can be entirely self-contained, or very easily dropped into another setting, and it functions very, very well. But now that I've said all that, I'm about to sail into some pretty dangerous waters. In other words, we're about to hit some spoilers. So if you're a player who is interested in Jewel of the Indigo Isles, I strongly recommend that you go ahead and step away from this video, but send your storyteller to check out this video and maybe check out that free PDF from Roll for Combat. That way they can see if it would be a good fit for you and your table. But if you're a player who is interested in this adventure path and you go any farther in this video, I want to go ahead and warn you, I will be talking about some spoilers for the adventure, and it's not my fault if you stick around and spoil those parts of the adventure for yourself. Alright, so storytellers who have stuck around this long, let's go ahead and talk about some of the negatives and positives of this adventure, and some of the things I think are worth being aware of if you decide to pick up this adventure and run it for your gaming table. And I want to go ahead and talk about some of the negatives up front, just so you're aware of them. I will go ahead and tell you, the players in my high school TTRPG club loved this adventure. Seriously, when the adventure was over, I had a lot of students who were offering compliments, that were coming up to me. There were students who were literally saying, this is the best story we've ever been in. I got a lot of positive feedback on this adventure, and I think Roll for Combat did a fantastic job. But even if I really love this adventure, I do think that there are some negatives you want to know up front, so that if you're approaching this product, you are mindful of them. None of them, I think, sink the adventure, and all of them, I think, are reasonably easy to address, but I still think they're worth discussing. One of the weaknesses of this adventure, I've actually already talked about a little bit, and that is the fact that this book, as sizable as it may be, is not a standalone product. Again, this is something that is intentional in terms of when Roll for Combat was developing this product. Jewel of the Indigo Isles is a support product for Battlezoo Bestiary and not the other way around. So if you want to run Jewel of the Indigo Isle, you are going to need Battlezoo Bestiary, and I think you should be aware that if you are making an investment in this adventure path, you're also going to be making an investment in the Battlezoo Bestiary. Now, I use it all the time, even outside of this particular AP, but the prospect of needing 2 books, not just 1 book, is something that you want to keep in mind as a storyteller. The next thing that I think you need to know as a storyteller, and this is something you may have already picked up on in my discussion so far, and that is that the tone of this story is, what's a good way of saying this? Disney. When you hear the phrase pirate-themed adventure, that opens up a very wide range of possibilities in terms of what kind of story might be told. Pirate-themed can run the gamut all the way from super child-friendly Disney Saturday morning cartoons, all the way to like hard-rated R. Oh my gosh, I just missed the perfect pun for this video. And when Roll for Combat developed this adventure, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that they leaned into making this adventure family-friendly. This adventure path is very much something that you could run almost entirely as is with a group of middle schoolers and not worry about content. In fact, I think there's one content warning in 415 pages. That should tell you how toned down this adventure can be. I say that because if you and your players are looking for pirate-themed, you may not be looking for family-friendly Disney cartoon pirate-themed. Now, I will say, in regards to the pirate theming of this book, it's not hard to turn it up a bit if that's something that you and your players would want to do. Like, I was running for high school students, and I will tell you that I made some of the encounters a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more deadly. I made some of the scenarios a little bit scarier when I was running for my high school students. I didn't turn it up too hard. But overall, it's not too difficult to adjust the tone, but just be aware that if you are interested in running this adventure, that if you and your players are looking for a more serious tone or a more serious style, that you may need to do some adjustments in how this adventure is presented in order to make it fit. To give you an example, there's an encounter during Act 1 where one of the player characters will be challenged to a duel by a rival pirate captain, and during that duel, the rival pirate captain is going to try to cheat. When the pirate captain does that, you can very easily lean into the dirty fighting and the dirty tactics that that pirate captain is employing, and when you do that, that will adjust the tone up very quickly. You don't have to change a lot about that scenario to make it feel like a more serious and dangerous engagement, even if the initial presentation feels a bit soft at first glance. The next thing worth noting about how Jewel of the Indigo Isles approaches this story is that a lot of the content is very tightly clustered around specific things. To give you an example, Act 1 is all about this treasure map that used to belong to Captain Von Fleet. You start out with half of the treasure map, and then you have to find the other half of the treasure map, and then you have to repair the treasure map, and then you're following the treasure map. But all of it is very much condensed and clustered around the classic pirate trope of X marks the spot. And you may remember from earlier that last school year, I ran my players through Act 1 of this adventure. If you know anything about a high school schedule, that means that I spent almost 8 months on my players finding a treasure map, repairing a treasure map, and following a treasure map. In other words, there was a lot of content around this treasure map. Now, I will tell you, my players were never frustrated in how the content was presented. Like I said, my students enjoyed this story, but I will say behind the scenes, as a storyteller, there were many occasions where I was like, how much more complicated can finding a treasure map get? I wouldn't blame you if you're running this for your home game if you decided to break some of the content in these chapters up so that your players are not just chasing down a treasure map or not just sailing from one island to the next. I would consider adding some side quests in here and there to break up the story just a little bit. Overall, I feel like the story is very solid, but at times it does feel like it's really hyper-focused on one thing at a time, and I feel like some variety would really help this adventure. The next thing that I want to note is, and this is truly the only major criticism I have of the entire story, one of the big plot twists of this adventure is that Pirate Captain Poppy Von Fleet is not actually a pirate. Pirate was her cover story for something else that she was doing, and I'm just going to tell you that I took that plot point and I threw it out the window. According to the story that your players will slowly be unraveling, Captain Poppy Von Fleet went up against an evil cult called the Cult of the Shivering Behemoth. And this is a cult that was very oppressive. This was a cult that believed in the acquisition of power and crushing those that were beneath them. And honestly, I feel like Poppy Von Fleet not being a pirate, using pirate as a cover story, was done more to keep the tone like family friendly than it was done because of the needs of the story. I can't see any major changes that would be necessary in this story if Poppy Von Fleet is just actually a pirate who is fighting against this evil cult. I don't think it changes the story at all. So me personally, I think that plot point is just not very engaging. I think it is an unnecessary twist, and it's something that I discarded when I ran this story, and my players never noticed that anything was missing, so ultimately I don't think it was a very big deal. The final weakness worth discussing on this story is this book very heavily uses the Battle Zoo Bestiary. Now, I like the Battle Zoo Bestiary, I've said that before, but that does mean that some of the things you would expect in a pirate-themed adventure are not necessarily going to be there. For example, earlier in this video, I teased the idea that I threw my players up against a kraken. Well, that's not part of the adventure. I added the kraken in because I'm like, you have to have a kraken in a pirate-themed adventure. That is a necessity. Because this product focuses so heavily on the RPG Superstar 2020 monsters, I would say that as a storyteller, I think it's a good idea to go and add some of the normal monsters you would expect in a seafaring campaign, because this adventure will feel like it's missing a bit of something in some places, and I think that part of that is because it focuses so heavily on RPG Superstar monsters. Don't get me wrong, I love them, my stuff is in there, but I would recommend as a storyteller looking for places where you can insert some classic monsters, because I think your players will enjoy that. But I do want to stress that overall, I think that Jewel of the Indigo Isles is a really good adventure path. If I'm being entirely transparent, I'm a storyteller who normally doesn't like published APs. I feel like my players are a little too prone to going too off the rails, and I often want to go do my own thing. So at my personal tables, I very rarely use APs, and if I pick up an adventure path, I'm usually using it for inspiration for something I'm ultimately going to create myself. Normally, I don't actually run adventure paths, but in this case, I ran Jewel of the Indigo Isles for almost 8 months, and I had a great time doing it, and my students had a great time playing it. So I will say, of the various adventure paths I've seen published, both by Paizo and outside of Paizo, this is easily one of the strongest APs I've ever seen. And honestly, it's one that I'm considering trying to run again sometime, because I would really like to get into Acts 2 and Acts 3 and see how those play out as well, because I really like what Roll for Combat did here. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things I like about this AP and why I think that this is a quality product. The first and most important thing I want to say is there is a lot of content in Jewel of the Indigo Isles. This book is massive. This is 415 pages designed to take characters from 1st to 11th level, and Roll for Combat crams a ton of content in this book. Seriously, I am impressed. Now allow me to say this isn't going to be a perfect comparison, but if you were to take a normal Paizo 6-volume adventure path and compare it to Jewel of the Indigo Isles, Jewel of the Indigo Isles ends up with somewhere around 15 to 20% more content than a comparable AP published by Paizo. Seriously, it's a huge book and there's a lot to do. For my club, I was running every 2 weeks for almost 8 months, and I'll go ahead and tell you that to get to the end of Act 1, I actually had to cut a lot of content out of that book so that my students could get to the point in the story I wanted them to get to. Even though this adventure path is only designed to take characters up to 11th level, I could easily see the base adventure path providing content for a gaming table for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and if you're the kind of storyteller who wants to add their own content in and maybe flesh out the adventure path a little bit, I could easily see this AP running close to 3 years for a lot of gaming groups. There is a ton of content here, and allow me to say, it's really well designed. There were a lot of very memorable encounters, there were a lot of very memorable things, there was a lot of really fun stuff that was crammed into this book that I think that both game masters and players are going to enjoy. I've already teased that this adventure path includes expanded options for the pirate archetype, and again, free archetype pirate, give it to your players, just do it, it's appropriate for this adventure. Roll for Combat has given us a lot of great content in here, but one of the things that I think really stands out about this AP is the content variety was just consistently high quality. There was never really a point in the entirety of Act 1 that felt like the content was just replaying something the players had already done. Even if I felt like the players were chasing the map for far too long, they were definitely chasing the map through a lot of interesting and unique scenarios and encounters, and it felt like the AP changed it up for my players on a very consistent basis. Having read through Acts 1, 2, and 3, there are 2 encounters in Act 1 and Act 2 that seem kind of similar, and there are 2 encounters in Act 2 and Act 3 that seem kind of similar, but even in those instances, they are far enough apart that I don't think your typical player is going to feel like you're just kind of rehashing old content as a storyteller. This AP keeps it very fresh and unique as you're going throughout the adventure, and there's a lot of fun stuff here. I want to go ahead and talk about 3 particular portions of this adventure that I think the AP did really, really well. That is the parade escape, the ghost ship, and the 2-part super dungeon, all of which can be found in the first act of the story. First up, the parade escape. So, very early on in this story, your characters are going to be going up against a group of evil pirates known as the Iron Eels. And as part of that, they're going to need to rescue a scholar that has gotten in trouble with the Iron Eels, and I really enjoy this encounter. Your players go into this tavern that is controlled by the Iron Eels, and they go in and they have to help extract this scholar, get him out of this dangerous situation, and they have to try to bluff or intimidate their way out of the scenario. But eventually your players are going to get back out into the street, they've got the scholar in tow, and when they step back out into the street, all of a sudden they find themselves surrounded by pirates. The Iron Eels have called in their allies, and the street is just flooded with angry and dangerous pirates who are getting ready to just mob your PCs. And then they hear music. As the pirates start to close in, a massive parade comes around the corner, and dancers and musicians and confetti, just wild celebration, comes marching down the street, and suddenly your players and the scholar that they're trying to protect have to use the parade as cover to escape from the Iron Eel pirates, and it is an absolutely hilarious scene. It was so much fun watching my students come up with all different wild ways to try to hide themselves in this parade to get away from the evil pirates. It was such a great scene, and if you're familiar with the chase mechanics from Pathfinder 2e, they integrate perfectly into the scene. It was just incredibly, incredibly well done. Another scenario that I thought was really well done in this, as the group is chasing down the missing half of the map, they get sent to an old ghost ship. And in an effort not just to brag about things that I contributed to this AP, there is a particular monster from the Battle Zoo Bestiary called the Scroll Mold. And this was actually designed by my wife's cousin, Robert Garland, who was also a winner from RPG Superstar 2020. The players go onto this ghost ship where they have to chase around the map that they are trying to get, and this map is scurrying all over this ghost ship and leading them into traps and leading them into encounters with haunted things on the ship. It is just this absolutely hilarious scene, and even if I wasn't related by marriage to one of the people who authored a creature in the scene, I would say it's one of the most entertaining and fun encounters I've ever run. The ghost ship chasing of the map is golden. And then, for the end of Act 1, after your players finally have this map, they get to follow it, and it leads them to a place called the Shivering Mountain. To enter the Shivering Mountain, they have to make their way through some old mining tunnels, and those old mining tunnels are a fantastic super dungeon that your players have to deal with. And when your players get to the end of those mine tunnels, they will probably be relieved until they realize that the platform that they are riding is carrying them into the second part of this super dungeon, a secret pirate training ground. Seriously, the final dungeon for the end of Act 1 is an example of phenomenal design. It's divided into two very distinct halves, but both halves are challenging, they're engaging, they're fun, and I think your players will absolutely enjoy them both. And all three of these examples that I've mentioned, the Parade Escape, the Ghost Ship, the two-part Super Dungeon, this is all just content in Act 1, and I'm not even mentioning everything that my kids enjoy doing. Roll for Combat did a fantastic job of providing a lot of variety, of providing a lot of unique and interesting challenges, and it never feels like they're just dipping back into old content in an effort to fill page space. There is a lot of content here, it's high quality, it's well diversified, and as a result, my students absolutely loved it. And like I said, at the end of the school year, the compliments I got on this adventure path were consistently positive. My students truly enjoyed the experience. But with all of that, we come to the end of my review. Overall, I think Jewel of the Indigo Isle is easily one of the best adventure paths I've ever seen, and I give full props to Roll for Combat for creating such an engaging experience. There are a few places where I feel like the story could be fleshed out a bit. There are a few places where I feel like you will want to add some things in as a storyteller, but overall, I didn't have to change a lot about this story to provide the students at my school a fantastic experience, and this is something that I would actually like to run again so that I can see Acts 2 and Acts 3. I think that Roll for Combat has delivered a high quality product. But the time has come for me to turn the conversation over to you. Do you have any questions about Jewel of the Indigo Isles, and would you be interested in running it for your gaming table? Or is this an adventure that your gaming table has actually tried, and if so, what was your experience with it? I would love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to leave those in the comments section below. Also, if you would be interested in me covering some of the other products from Roll for Combat, let me know that as well, and I might try to add that into my future video schedule. Don't forget to do all the other stuff that helps to support the channel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and Patreon. All of those links are in the video description, along with links to all the products discussed in today's video. And, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.